you so much. And you can talk for 15, 20 minutes.
Okay.
And then the sheet, whoops. I think that everybody, if anybody wanted to speak and you didn't get your name on there,
Okay.
I think we got everybody covered there.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Christopher, and I'm an alcoholic. I really appreciate you guys having me out here tonight. It's always an honor and a pleasure to get asked to come share, hopefully, some experience, strength, and hope that will help someone else. I mean, that's a huge thing that we get to do around here, and it's definitely one of the light spots in my life for sure. It's funny because I haven't actually got to share on my actual story in a long time. It's usually like at step study meetings and stuff like that. And so I asked our secretary, I said, well, what do you want me to talk about? And she goes, well, just tell them what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Which, if you've been around a little while, or if this is your first meeting, that's fine. But that's usually, it's usually how it goes around here. I just wanted to say first, if you're new, Leanne, Lauren, Walter, welcome back. Josh, Danielle, Keith. This is a great place to call home, and it has been for me for a long time. And especially for a kid that grew up like I did, that always looked for a home and never really had one. I found my home here, and I could definitely tell you that worked for me, and you could too. I really don't find it necessary to get into like a big long drunk-a-log and tell you all these crazy gnarly things that like happened to me and all of this, but I will say this. My drinking and my using as well, but this is AA, cost me countless relationships with my family, with my friends, with people that I was close to. At times it cost me my freedom. It ended up costing me a lot of things that later I looked back, and I didn't realize it at the time, but something I learned in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is that dark past could be one of the greatest assets that I have, because with that I could go back and I could help somebody else. It's funny, I get kind of choked up when I talk about this stuff sometimes, because it means a lot to me. It really does. I mean, this thing literally saved my life. When I first met the members of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was 16 years old. I was a kid. I'm still a kid. I mean, for God's sakes. But I wasn't really ready to hear it, but I remember walking in here, and I remember that I was supposed to be walking into a meeting of a bunch of drunks and addicts, and everybody seemed like really happy, and they were like really friendly, and they were like really nice. They were all smiling, and that was nothing like any other drunks and addicts that I had been hanging around my whole life, so that was quite a bit different, But you guys, you loved me until I could love myself, and that was really important. You guys rocked me to sleep, as Chuck C. used to like to say a lot, if you're familiar with him. You lulled me to sleep when I couldn't do it for myself. The way that I drank and the way that I used, I like to look at it like this. My friend Mike from Santa Paula said this, and I really like it. He said that, I'll show you, I'll hurt me. And that was how he rolled, and that was how I rolled. I drank every single day, I used every single day, and because that was what I'd grown up with, that's what I knew. That was my reality. That was everything that I had seen my whole life, everybody I looked up to, everything I ever wanted to be, and everything else. And something else that I realized after I'd been doing this for a while is that was all based in my self-centered fear of things that had happened before and things that hadn't happened yet. And I was so scared all the time, just so scared all the time. And, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and be like, oh, every day is like amazing, and I just walk down the street and the sun just shines and it's great. Everybody deals with our day-to-day things, our life on life's terms. That's what happens after you get sober. Just because you quit drinking and quit getting high doesn't mean that stuff's going to stop happening, But it means that we're going to deal with it differently. It means that we can see it with that new pair of glasses. There's this really famous Chuck C. story where he's sitting in his house, and I really look up to Chuck, man. I learned a lot from that guy down south. He passed away before I even got to meet him, but I feel like I've known him. That guy taught me so much. And one of the things he said is he was sitting in his house one night, and he's bawling his eyes out. He's trying to get sober. He can't figure it out. He's sitting in this chair. His wife's not treating him right. His job's not treating him right. All these different things. Fast forward 20 years, Chuck's sitting in the same chair in the same house working for the same company, married to the same lady, and he's happier than he's ever been in his life. And the point of that story is that all that changed was his perspective. And that's it. And that's what Chuck's book was about, New Pair of Glasses. Is, sometimes heaven's just a new pair of glasses, just a different perspective. Something I always try to mention, especially, and it's so awesome, there's so many new people here, and that's just great, it makes me so stoked, is that this thing it's all about today, man. It's always about today. We do this thing in 24-hour intervals. I don't care if you have 30 minutes, 30 years, 30 days, whatever. It's 24 hours at a time. We stay in today. Because when Bill and Bob first put this thing together, they didn't get together and they were like, okay, we're going to stay sober forever. That wasn't like the idea that worked for them. In fact, they had tried to make that work and it didn't really work out very well. But when they figured out that just by one drunk helping another, they could do this thing for 24 hours at a time. And then they just did the same thing the next day. And they just did the same thing the next day. And it sounds really simplistic, but this is a very simple program for very complicated people like me. And it just made a lot of sense to me when that was explained to me like that. I had tried to overcomplicate and overthink things for my entire life. So when somebody just laid out a very simple kit of spiritual tools to me and just said, hey man, this is just how we do it. The steps are over here. Just roll with that and get with the guy that's done this before and he'll take you through it. That made a lot of sense to me, because I was so tired of living the way that I'd been living for so long. I was just so beat down and just over it. And, I feel really lucky to have gotten here at a young age. And to be completely honest, I didn't stay here when I got here at a young age. I went out after that and then I came back because I had to go find out if this thing was really for me, if I was really an alcoholic. Because that's a hard thing to swallow when you're in your 20s. When you've had a few years and you're doing this thing and you're working with sponsees and all this stuff, and then you're sitting there going, maybe I just made bad decisions, But I'll tell you this, man, for a drunk like me, it doesn't matter if you're 10 or 100. If I have that first drink, I'm over. That's how it's going to go every single time. And I've played that out multiple different times. And I'll tell you right now, it doesn't really get any better. It never it never changes. I've never heard anybody come back from a relapse and be like, man, that was the best experience, and that's why I love it. You know what I mean? That's not really how that goes. I was very lucky in this thing, to fall in with a group of men really early that really, man, these guys, they really changed my life a lot. They taught me a lot about what it is to be just a stand-up guy, man, and to be the man that I always wanted to be, if that makes sense. And my grand sponsor lives in Santa Rosa, my sponsor lives in Santa Rosa, and they're guys that I've been following around in this thing since I was a pup, and some of you guys know those guys. My grand sponsor, when I first met him, he told me, Christopher, I'm going to make you I'm going to make you a promise. And I said, okay, whatever. I was willing to listen to pretty much anything at that point. And he said, well, if you work the steps here on this wall, and you do as suggested, and you maybe listen to just a couple suggestions, like when you jump out of a parachute, you might want to pull the ripcord. That's a suggestion, then your life will get 100 times better. And he goes, you most likely, you can never have to drink again or use again if you don't want to. And he goes, but I'll make you one better. Because if you take that 12th one and go work this with another guy afterwards and take somebody else through this, your life will get 1,000 times better. And at the time, I was so young and so new in the program, I kind of thought I understood what that meant. In reality, here a long time down the road, I think I maybe just kind of scratching the surface of what he actually meant. But what I know for sure is that, the life that I have today is so different, man, than the life I had before. It's insane. I haven't had to look over my shoulder in as long as I can remember. I haven't had to worry about too messed up to be driving, what I have in the car, do I have a warrant out, all these different things that could have been happening at this time or another. I don't even think about that stuff anymore, man, ever. Not ever. And even on my hardest days, that's something that brings me a lot of peace. I can just be like, hey, technically speaking, does any of this really matter? Are all these big life things that are getting me so trapped up really that big of a deal? The answer is no, man. It's usually not. Not ever. I heard somebody explain the steps once in really easy to understand language for me. And they said, okay, Christopher, 1 through 3, we give it a 4 through 9, we keep it up. Or no, sorry, 1 through 3, we give it up. 4 through 9, we clean it up. 10 through 12, we keep it up. And that was so simplistic to me. It made so much sense, man. We give it up to our Creator. We clean up the past, and then we give it away. And that's it. That's the whole program in a nutshell. And like I said, very simple ideas for a simple drunk like me. Makes a lot of sense. When I was up north a while ago, this guy explained to me about these big, huge trees. They have these beautiful trees up there. These things are gorgeous. I mean, like up by Shasta and stuff, these, huge monumental trees. They're like bigger than this room. It's crazy. And somebody asked me, they said, well, do you know how these things grow together? Like, do you know how they work? And I looked at him like, the foggiest idea what you're talking about. And he goes, well, the way that these things work is down under the forest floor, these gigantic trees, their roots, they all lock together underneath, and they all feed off each other, and they all harvest from each other. That's how they live. That's how they survive. And a lot of times, if you see these big, huge trees growing out in the middle of nowhere, they fall over if they're on their own because they can't support themselves. And I thought that was one of the best analogies for how the program of Alcoholics Anonymous works I'd ever heard. Because that's how this thing works, man. If you're a guy and you're new, get with some guys, get with some old timers that have been doing this for a while, and stick with them. Or some young guys, or anybody that will listen and understand you, man. And you support each other in this thing, because if we fall apart, everybody dies. But if we stay together, we can all live, And that might sound kind of morbid or whatever, but that's been my experience, man, because I've seen a lot of people, unfortunately, come and go in this thing. And some of them, yeah, it's just sad when that happens. So, it's good to stick around. I heard some guy say the other day, too, in our morning meeting that I just absolutely loved. He said, what did he say? First we came, then we came to, then we came to believe. And he was referring to the Come to Believe book. And I'd never heard that before, I thought I'd been hanging out long enough to hear most every adage. And that was a new one for me. I thought that was really cool. Because it really reminded me of how I came into the program. Like, when I first showed up, I didn't have any idea what this was about. I was looking for a place to control my drinking and using. Because that's what I haven't heard that from a lot of people. Like, I just came here to learn how to drink like a normal person, because I figured that's what you guys do here. And, I quickly was, tutored that that's not what we do here, But what I learned was that after a little time, and after a little work, and after growing closeness in the likeness of my Creator, and with a personal relationship with my Creator, that I wouldn't go back to that for anything. I really wouldn't. And not to say, like I said, that, every day is great, because it's not, man. But the life that I have today, I wouldn't trade for anything, especially not that first drink. Because it's not the 10th drink that kills me, man. It's the first one. That's where it always starts, And maybe some of you guys know what I'm talking about. Maybe you don't. It's funny, man, because we all have different experiences here that we can share with each other, And when I first met Tom, the guy I'm talking about in Santa Rosa, one of the things he said to me was, and he was speaking in front of a meeting, man, and I swear this guy might as well have had like light glowing off of him when I first met him. I was just so into what this dude was saying. It made so much sense to me. He was standing up in front of the meeting, and he said that when he got here, he was bankrupt, spiritually, financially, physically, living in a little messed up studio apartment, and lost everything, lost his kids, lost his wife. Like, he had been just really going through it, man. And but then, he's 20 years sober at the time that I'm seeing him speak that night, and he said that standing in front of you is the happiest man on the planet, the richest man you'll ever meet, and I have more friends and closer friends than I ever could have known. And when he said that to me at first, and when he said it to the meeting, I was like, well, that definitely sounds like something that I want in my life. That sounds amazing, And he was right, man. That's what we get. I just lived down in LA for like 5 years almost, and then I moved back, and I talked to guys that I hadn't talked to in 6-7 years, and it was like it had been 6-7 minutes I mean, some of these guys, let me put it this way. Back when I was drinking and hanging out and doing what I was doing before, I had guys that were my friends, man, people that I would have died for, that I called them on the phone, and I wouldn't hear from these guys for weeks sometimes. These guys in the program up here, I hit them up, within 10 minutes, I heard from every single one of them. And some of these guys I hadn't talked to, like I said, for years. And they called me like we had just talked yesterday. And they were like, hey man, how's it going? You know, like what's going on? And I had a lot of fear coming back up here, man, because I was like, there was some of these guys I felt like I kind of wronged, because, you know, you get sober and things get going for a while, and then life starts growing, life starts happening, you know, a lot of good things start happening. And, you know, life gets going, and I felt like I kind of got away from it for a second. When I came back home to Sonoma, it just felt like not just physically coming home, it felt like really coming home. So I'm going to try to keep this short because I know that I'm on a time clock. It's really hard to put your whole life into 15 minutes, I'll tell you that. But you know, I'll just say this. If you're new and you first got here, and I don't care what your gig was, man, I don't care if it was booze, you know this is AA, but booze, pills, whatever it might have been, okay, because all those things were my gig too, okay. I'll tell you this, if you don't want to, 24 hours at a time, you don't ever have to feel like that ever again if you don't want to. If you want to make that decision, you know. And I guarantee you that if you do this work and you stick with people that have done this before, you know, and just stick on the path for a little while, your life will get better. And if you work the steps honestly, wholeheartedly, it'll get 100 times better. It took me 4 times working the steps until I actually worked them, honestly. I've been through them to the best of my ability once, twice, 3 times. The 4th time I did a 4th step, or a 5th step rather, with my sponsor, there was times when we laughed. I cried like a little kid. We talked about life. I mean, by the end of it, it was ridiculous. We had like, next to us, there was like a pile of cigarette butts, like 100 pistachio shells, and like 10 empty Pepsis on the table. I mean, we were there. I mean, we were hanging out all day, you know. And, you know, I got to share things with that man. Man, that were just free. I mean, that's what we get here. We get to be free, you know, really free, to really let this stuff go, you know. Because the fact is all this stuff that we carry around, all this negativity and stuff that we've learned, these masks that we wear, it's all mostly not based in reality, man. 99.9% of the time it's based upon things that either haven't happened yet or never will happen. You know, and the longer we do this thing, we kind of realize that and see that. I'm just going to end with this, like I said, because I know that I'm on a time thing. So, but there's this guy, Jimmy K, and some of you guys know who that is, some of you guys don't. And he's the guy that started Narcotics Anonymous. But Jimmy K introduces himself as a humble and gratified member of Alcoholics Anonymous when he speaks. He's not around anymore, but I heard a tape of him speaking one time, and it was a life-changing experience for me. Jimmy's message was just amazing. This guy got clean and got sober at a time when addicts were literally being locked up for meeting in rooms together. It was a much different time than we live in today. It wasn't looked at in this like big positive way. It was looked at in a very negative way. And at the end of Jimmy's talk, he's looking out in this audience of like thousands of alcoholics and thousands of addicts. And what he says is, you know, when you see a fellow addict or a fellow alcoholic struggling, you know, look on him with compassion. You know, see yourself in him. And if you see him doing good, look upon him with pride. You know, because that's us too. So that's what I got. Thank you.